discover the natural power of ashwagandha, an ancient herb known for its healing properties. For over 3,000 years, ashwagandha has been trusted to reduce stress, increase energy, and improve focus. Our ashwagandha is carefully grown, harvested, and processed to retain its maximum potency. Each root is hand-picked and dried, then ground into a pure organic powder, ensuring the highest quality. Simply mix 1 teaspoon into your favorite beverage or take it in capsule form as prescribed by a healthcare professional. Whether you're looking to balance your stress levels, boost your immune system, or enhance mental clarity, ashwagandha offers a natural solution. Experience the benefits of ancient wisdom backed by modern science. Trust nature. Trust ashwagandha. Go get this product at blackhotfirenetwork.com at the Sports and Nutrition Store.
Good afternoon, family. Hope you guys are doing amazing, and welcome to another beautiful episode of the Africa Today Show. My name is Joby. To those who are here for the first time, you can call me actually Velma today. It's giving Velma from Scooby-Doo. Remember Velma from Scooby-Doo? It's really giving that. I feel like that's the look I'm giving today with the hair and then the glasses. It's literally giving Velma from Scooby-Doo. But anyway, karibuni sana. I hope you guys are doing amazing. Good afternoon again. Good evening from my end. It is exactly 2 minutes past 8 p.m. I hope you had a beautiful, beautiful day. And of course, still wishing you a beautiful day, rest part of your day as you continue with it. For me, it's been amazing. Literally looking forward to unwinding this one and looking forward to what the rest of the week has in store. But what we're looking forward to on this conversation, I have some amazing video I want us to share. As our main conversation of the day. I remember on Monday I shared a very interesting video which I was continue yesterday, but personally I think if I don't get to do something on the right day that I've said, I no longer go back and focus into it. What I'm gonna do is maybe share the rest of the video that remained, which was 1 hour and 30 minutes, for you guys to continue watching that, which was explaining literally about the melon. The melon family, the melon family, I would like to pronounce it, and how they were actually one of the biggest competitors with the Rothschild family, the Rockefeller family. But today I have another interesting conversation and video as we look at literally how China was taking control of, when you talk about the opium trading, and also the building of Shangai, and literally who is behind this. We have one of the family, which is a Jewish family, that is behind this, and it's called the Sassoon family. And literally want us to talk about that. So karibuni sana. But before we get started, a quick reminder to download our app on the Google Play Store. Black Hot Fire Network is the name, and of course through the app you can get yourself the amazing organic supplements on the like of ashwagandha, multivitamin, and so much more. But as we get started, I've shared some multivitamin. We also have other more amazing supplements, but get yourself also some beetroot as we get to continue with today's conversation.
Beetroot, nature's powerhouse. Packed with vitamins, antioxidants, and nitrates, it's known to support heart health, boost stamina, and improve blood circulation. Our beetroot is naturally grown and harvested at peak ripeness. The roots are cleaned, dried, and finely ground to preserve their rich nutritional content, giving you all the benefits in one pure form. Add 1 teaspoon of beetroot powder to your juice, smoothie, or water, or take it in capsule form as recommended by your healthcare provider. Beetroot helps enhance endurance, lower blood pressure, and keep you feeling energized and balanced all day. Fuel your body with the natural power of beetroot. Stay strong, stay healthy. Go get this product at blackhotfirenetwork.com at the Sports and Nutrition Store.
$20.90. But before we get started with that conversation right away, as we get to, because it's really long, I want us to talk a little bit about what Keith wanted me to share this video, but I'm not going to share it without him, so that we can understand what he wanted to say about this. But it's a really disturbing video where we saw an African taxi driver, not specific where he is from, whether it's from Kenya or where, but he's an African, and he was attacked. First, according to the video, you can see the Arab guy who assaulted him was trying to kind of give sexual favors, or whatever he was trying to do. And then when the guy said no, and also being astonished as a man why another man is touching you, he ended up, choking the guy because of accepting his favors or anything. So I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm going to share it maybe towards the end of the show as we wind up with that to understand more details. But I'd love to start with what Lupita Nyong'o said, because earlier today I did mention it, how literally she explained how after Oscar winning, she kept on receiving more roles to continue acting, showcasing the slavery, you know, history and everything that took place when it came to slavery, which personally I do feel like this is them mocking us. It's number one, you've never acknowledged this history, not in books, not even even with the movies you show, it's still not favorable to us. You're not respectful enough to even like not use it for your own advantage, because the more these movies sell, it's for their own advantage as well. It's not like they really, because the real black histories and movies, we've seen them, they never even go further. I think we had one that they were trying to release on Amazon or on Hulu, and then they rejected it, something that was actually well packaged by a group of a community, a group of black people coming up with real facts and backed up with evidence of what really took place. So I feel like personally this is disrespectful, but let's hear her thoughts. I'm not saying what she's saying, but them always approaching you with this kind of sort of roles.
One of the questions that I also have is, when you win your Oscar, how does that impact your career, and how that also opened doors for you to do many things that you're doing today?
Well, my winning an Academy Award came at the very start of my career. It was for the very first film that I had done. So it really did set the paces for everything I've done since. But what's interesting is that after I won that Academy Award, you think, oh, I'm going to get lead roles here and there. Oh, Lupita, we'd like to play another movie where you're a slave, but this time you're on a slave ship. Those are the kinds of offers I was getting in the months after.
We've seen, at least maybe with the little movies we've seen, especially when you talk about the slave history on the ships, it's very horrific, like super horrific. And again, I go back to the fact that these people don't even acknowledge what they did and still figure out ways of justifying their actions. This is despicable to even hear it, literally.
And it was a very tender time, because the world has now, there's an expectation for you and your career. There were think pieces about, oh, is this the end of is this beginning and end of this dark-skinned black woman, African woman's career? And I had to deafen myself to all those pontificators, because at the end of the day, I'm not a theory, I'm an actual person. I like to be a joyful warrior for changing the paradigms of what it means to be African. And if that means that I work one job less a year to ensure that I'm not perpetuating the stereotypes that are expected of people from my continent, then let me do that.
Yeah,
so,
and I really like that.
Lupita Nyong'o talked about
I really like that. Personally, I don't know what you guys think about it. Personally, I like the way she answered the question. Maybe it's for the camera, for your audience and everything, but that's the way, again, we go back to, we keep on speaking about how Africans, we've lost dignity within ourselves, literally, where Africans' dignity, apart from being ripped up from them, the people no longer know how to preserve the little dignity left with them. And it comes with this kind of roles, literally, because like a good example, what we're talking about today on my show, the Pan-African Bliss, about the Kenyan celebrities who are going to Israel for a campaign that is called Israel in Kenya campaign. And so many people, of course, have complained about this, especially the Kenyans criticizing this group of celebrities that are there, who have gone to Israel and who are actually pushing this campaign, because we know Israel as a country, who they are, okay? If we don't go into details because they don't like being mentioned, we know who they are, we know what they do. This is not even about Palestine, this is globally. So the fact that most of the people don't, and because of the oppression, living in poverty. Again, you being African, you don't even understand history. Please go do research on some things before you're given something to sign. Understand how effective it's going to be to your people. And especially, I love the fact that she said, I'm not a theory, I'm an actual person. And there's no way you expect me to just put out a character or a play out there about the history of my people. And this history still bleeds actively till to date. That is something I keep on saying, because our history, it's not done. It's not like we keep on talking about history like the Black history, it's done. It's still on. People are getting killed for just standing up with their people. People are getting killed for standing up with what is truthful. So just that little dignity of saying no, you'd rather work one job less rather than put your whole career on a jeopardy because you want to impress the white man. I mean, I feel like that is something, I like the way she answered it personally.
Black a role she's been offered since winning her Oscar. She sat down with Grammy Award-winning artist Angelique Kidjo when she brought up the Oscar that she won back in 2014 for 12 Years a Slave and what her experience with getting roles has been. Now, Lupita talked about how when she got the Oscar, it was for the first thing that she has ever done versus with actors who are wanting their career, they get the Oscar. So her experience was vastly different compared to the rest. And she brought up how she was offered more slave roles after the movie, and she wasn't getting a lot of roles that were wanting her to expand her identity as an African woman. She said she didn't want to perpetuate the stereotype of what Africans are, especially African women, and that when it comes to her doing a role, she wants to do it right. Now, of course, people could argue that she's been in notable roles since winning the Oscar. Of course, she's part of the MCU as Nakia in the Black Panther franchise. She was in Us, that was produced and directed by Jordan Peele. She was in the Quiet Place prequel. But when you look at her discography and how much she's done since winning the Oscar, it hasn't been a lot. And there's very few leading roles she's been in. This is a conversation that is always happening on a weekly basis online, especially when it comes to Black women leading projects. And the conversations are gearing up again because of the comparisons between her and Divine Joy Randolph, who won Best Supporting Actress in 2024 for The Holdover. Now, Divine Joy Randolph is well into her career. I'd already known her from her previous projects, but she swept award season when it came to The Holdover. She got the Golden Globe, she got the Critics' Choice Award, she got the SAG Award. I believe she got the BAFTA. I believe she was nominated, and she went on to win an Oscar. However, a lot of people pointing out that the roles that she's been offered since winning the Oscar and the projects we've seen so far have not matched up to her white counterpart. Now, some of the projects we've seen so far, they've been on hold for a minute, so we haven't seen her post-Oscar roles unfold yet. But again, the conversation can still be had. It's gotten to the point where people are calling this a curse among Black actresses when it comes to the lack of opportunity after winning an Oscar, whether it's in leading like Halle Berry or in the supporting role where a lot of us are being put in. Even with Angela Bassett, she got an honorary Oscar after being nominated for Wakanda Forever and getting snubbed. The crux of the conversation is that a racist industry barely rewards Black actors, especially Black women, for their work unless they're playing a struggle role. And you have to fight and hit down more doors in order to get the roles that you want to play. I'm glad that Lupita spoke on this and was honest about it. Hopefully a lot more people have a lot more empathy towards Black actors and their acting opportunities, because this industry is rough right now, especially after the strike.
I feel like personally, to add on what she just said, we can't really do that depending on the same system that wants to keep on playing the same role for their own benefit. What we can do, again, if possible, shout out to people like the lady who came on what's this guy? Sharp Shannon. There's this guy who had Monique. It was Monique, yeah. Shout out to Monique. She, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly, she came, and her and Taraji P, when they talked about the earnings, even when it comes to this industry, how they're not paid well, how a lot of things. This has to go back to us creating what is really ours. But again, we're talking about this being in the same system of the people who control majority of these ships, if I'm making sense. So yeah, that is what is happening. I don't want to go much deeper into that, but shout out to Lupita Nyong'o for standing truthfully on her dignity as a person. But as we move on from other conversations, we have literally something that happened that was the beginning of this November. And I don't know how I missed out on this, but this regarding Trump removing the Black soldiers from the World War II memorial grounds. Let me get the details correctly before I get to share the video. Just a minute. So this happened literally at the beginning of November, but I don't know how I happened to miss this. But literally the news were out there, and I just bumped into this article yesterday. So apparently we have the black soldiers. The Black soldiers who have been removed from the World War II memorial. And of course, this has created so much outrage from not just the family, but so many Black people as well. And they're talking about history should not be erased, especially the stories of those who sacrificed the most. 2 panels honoring African American soldiers who fought in Europe during the World War II were recently removed from the visitor center at the American Cemetery in the Netherlands, sparking outrage from the families and advocates. One panel highlighted George Puritt, a New Jersey-born engineer who died in 1945 while saving a fellow soldiers. The other detailed the U.S. military strict policy of segregation during the war, a truth many say should never be hidden. The local leaders are now urging officials to reconsider the removal, emphasizing the importance of preserving Black military history and honoring the soldiers whose courage shaped the civil movement that followed. And their history matters. Their legacy matters. Their place in history does matter. And that is what is happening. I want to go through a few comments before I get to share the videos you can see on the screen. Someone says they want to erase all history so the younger generation won't know the truth, and it's that simple. Teach your children the real history, and that is so true. Someone says the plan is to erase our history, then erase us. Someone also says as the families should be literally, of course, outraged. Removed for what? This country is so effed up. My family and so on will always thank and remember our fallen Black soldiers that fought for this country, a country that doesn't even want to recognize them as heroes. It's a damn shame. So let me share this.
Donald Trump just secretly removed a plaque honoring Black American soldiers who died in World War II from an American cemetery in the Netherlands. It's just so evil. More than 8,200 Americans are buried at the Netherlands American Cemetery in the southern village of Margraten. Another 1,700 officially counted as missing have their names displayed. A total of 174 African American soldiers are buried or memorialized at this cemetery. It's the only U.S. military cemetery in the country. But Dutch media reported earlier this month that 2 informational panels about African American soldiers in the mid-20th century war had been taken down in the cemetery's visitor center. A local official who spoke anonymously said that authorities in the Limburg province where the cemetery is located was not informed of the removal. We don't know exactly when Donald Trump removed this tribute because, again, he did it in secret. He quietly did it, but it happened.
Exactly, because I didn't know about this. So it's crazy because I was like, how did this even miss my tabs? Because I was so surprised when I came to TikTok to look for the information. I'm like, what? This happened at the beginning of November, literally. But the information is coming out on most of the platforms right now. So this was literally done secretly.
Donald Trump and his MAGA lunatic buddies trying to erase Black history by saying it's DEI or woke is so despicable and racist. These are soldiers who fought for our freedoms. They deserve to be acknowledged. Yet, I guess Donald Trump doesn't agree.
Has removed a display from a U.S. military cemetery in the Netherlands that honors Black soldiers who served in World War II. The visitor center display commemorated the contributions of Black soldiers and highlighted the discrimination they faced in the military. Well, the panel in question was removed by the American Battle Monuments Commission earlier this year. The agency said it was due to an internal review of interpretive content under the agency's previous secretary, Charles Zhu, a Biden appointee who was dismissed by President Trump in April. According to Zhu, the removal was done via an internal agency review at the prompting of the Trump administration. The White House has yet to comment.
Yeah, so that is what is happening. This is very shameful, according to me. Very, very shameful. It's again, it goes back to like the same video I shared today about Brazil, the Palmas, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and how they completely erased these people and the region and claim that it doesn't exist. It's them, literally. Like it says, time changes, they don't. It's who they really are, literally. But as we move on to our main conversation, like I said, this is a long, long video. We're going to be talking about how the Sassoon family, which is a Jewish family, how they built Shanghai, and how they took control of China's opium trade. These are the Rothschilds. So let's look at this. Let me share my screen very quickly. Shared.
The Rothschilds controlled.
Shout out to, I see Jason in the building. Shout out to Aaron James says, I've been looking at the videos of the Sassoon family for the past couple of days. Nice. So means you have some information about it as I get to continue.
European banking. But there was another Jewish family you've never heard of that made the Rothschilds look poor. At their peak, the Sassoons controlled 70% of all opium flowing into China. 70%. They didn't just influence Shanghai's economy, they owned it. The docks, the mills, the banks, the real estate, everything. Here's what nobody tells you about the British Empire's conquest of China. It wasn't led by the British government. It was orchestrated by one family of Iraqi Jewish refugees who turned opium addiction into the largest fortune in Asian history. They addicted an entire nation, made billions, built an empire that stretched from Bombay to London. And when it all collapsed, they walked away with their wealth intact while millions died.
Before, as we continue, we have news and updates coming from Guinea-Bissau, where the president has been arrested by a group of military officers, and they have taken control of the country. So there is a coup currently happening in Guinea-Bissau. Stay updated.
The British called them the Rothschilds of the East. The Chinese called them something else entirely: drug lords, colonial parasites, the architects of China's century of humiliation. But what nobody knows is how they did it, how a family fleeing persecution in Baghdad became more powerful than the British East India Company, how they manipulated two empires, started wars, and built Shanghai into the Paris of the East, all on the backs of opium addicts. This is the story of the Sassoons, and I'm warning you now, it's not pretty. Chapter 1, Baghdad Exodus. David Sassoon wasn't supposed to be a refugee. Born in 1792 in Baghdad, he grew up in one of the city's most prominent Jewish families. His father, Saleh Sassoon, served as the chief treasurer to the pashas who governed Baghdad under Ottoman rule. The family lived in a massive courtyard house in the Jewish quarter. They wore fine silks. They read Hebrew and Arabic fluently. They were, by every measure, Baghdad's Jewish elite. The Sassoon name meant something. Sheikh Sassoon, as David's father was known, didn't just manage finances. He arbitrated disputes, represented the Jewish community to Muslim authorities, and controlled access to Ottoman patronage. When you needed something done in Baghdad, you went through the Sassoons. David absorbed this world completely. By his 20s, he spoke 5 languages: Hebrew, Arabic, Persian, English, and Hindustani. He understood accounting, trading networks, and most importantly, how to navigate between cultures. Skills that seemed ordinary in cosmopolitan Baghdad would become priceless in the chaos that followed. Everything shattered in 1828. Dawood Pasha, the Ottoman governor, turned paranoid. He saw conspiracies everywhere, started confiscating property, executing perceived enemies. The Sassoons, with their wealth and connections, became targets. Sheikh Sassoon died. Some sources say from stress, others whisper about poison. David, now the family leader at 36, faced an impossible choice: stay and risk everything, or run. He ran, first to Bushehr on the Persian Gulf in 1828. But Persia offered no real opportunities for a Jewish merchant without connections. So in 1832, he moved again, to Bombay, the crown jewel of British India. You need to understand what Bombay looked like in 1832. This wasn't the cosmopolitan metropolis it would become. The British had only controlled it for 170 years. David arrived with his wife, 8 children, and whatever portable wealth he'd managed to smuggle out of Baghdad. He rented space in the Bombay Fort area, where most foreign merchants operated. And then he did something brilliant. He refused to anglicize. While other immigrant merchants adopted British names, British dress, British customs, David kept his Arabic name, kept wearing traditional robes, kept his son studying Hebrew. The Sassoon household remained Orthodox, strictly kosher, Shabbat observant, Hebrew-speaking. This wasn't just cultural pride, this was strategy. You see, Bombay's economy ran on networks, Parsi networks, Gujarati networks, British networks. Each community controlled different trades through bonds of trust and shared language. David couldn't break into British networks. He was too foreign. He couldn't penetrate Parsi networks. He wasn't born into them. But he could create his own network, a Jewish trading house that connected Baghdad, Calcutta, Bombay, and eventually Canton. His first moves were cautious. He traded cotton, shipped textiles, nothing dramatic. But he was watching, learning, building relationships with other Baghdadi Jewish merchants who'd also fled to India, creating a community of trust in a city where trust was currency. The breakthrough came when he noticed something the British desperately wanted but couldn't easily access: opium distribution networks. The East India Company controlled opium production in Bengal. They grew it, processed it. But selling it in China, that required different skills, required merchants who could operate in Canton, navigate Chinese compradors, deal in multiple currencies, and crucially, operate outside official British channels because China had banned opium. David had those skills. His sons spoke multiple languages. His Baghdad connections gave him credibility with Middle Eastern traders operating in Asian ports. And his outsider status, not British, not Chinese, not beholden to the East India Company, made him perfect for the shadow economy of contraband. In 1832, David Sassoon and Sons officially opened for business. The firm's letterhead was in Hebrew. The business language was Arabic. But the commodity that would make them billions was opium, grown in India, shipped to China, sold to addicts. By 1837, just 5 years after arriving in Bombay, David had established a permanent agent in Canton. His son Elias Sassoon managed the Chinese operations. The family business was no longer about textiles or general trade. It was about opium. Specifically, about becoming the middleman between British production and Chinese addiction. The numbers started small, a few chests here and there. But David understood something crucial. The British would go to war to keep this trade flowing. The Chinese emperor had banned opium, confiscated foreign stocks, and executed dealers. Most merchants would have seen this as a crisis. David saw it as an opportunity. When the First Opium War erupted in 1839, David Sassoon and Sons was perfectly positioned. While British traders fled Canton, the Sassoons maintained their networks. While other firms collapsed, the Sassoons bought their contacts, their roots, their Chinese partnerships. By 1842, when Britain forced China to sign the Treaty of Nanking, the Sassoon network stretched from Bombay to Hong Kong. They had offices in Calcutta, warehouses in Canton, agents in Singapore. And with the new treaty ports opening, Shanghai, Ningbo, Fuzhou, Xiamen, David had a decision to make. He could stay in the established Canton trade, or he could gamble on Shanghai, a city that barely existed, a port that was literally just mudflats and fishing villages. David Sassoon made his choice. He sent his second son, Elias, north to Shanghai with clear instructions: establish dominance before anyone else realizes what this city will become. But this wasn't the end of the Sassoon story. This was just the foundation. Because what they built in Shanghai over the next 50 years would make their Bombay fortune look like pocket change. Chapter 2. Bombay Rising. Between 1843 and 1858, David Sassoon transformed from refugee merchant to the undisputed king of the India-China opium trade. These 15 years were the foundation, the period when the Sassoon trading empire went from small-time operation to monopolistic powerhouse. The genius was in the vertical integration. David didn't just trade opium. He controlled the entire supply chain. Start with production. David established relationships with opium growers in Patna and Benares. the two regions where the British East India Company grew its finest opium. While other traders bought at auction in Calcutta, the Sassoons negotiated advance contracts. They paid growers before harvest, locked in prices, guaranteed supply. When opium prices spiked, which happened constantly as demand in China exploded, the Sassoons had inventory at pre-spike costs while competitors scrambled. Then, shipping. David invested in his own fleet, owned the vessels outright. This wasn't about saving shipping costs, though that helped. This was about control. When you control the ships, you control timing, you control routing, you decide whether to flood the market or restrict supply. The Sassoon fleet grew to 23 vessels by 1850, each one flying the company flag, a Star of David in blue. Next, distribution networks. This is where David's sons became crucial. He had 8 sons, and each one managed a different node in the empire. Elias ran Shanghai operations. Abdullah handled Bombay and Calcutta. Sassoon David, yes, literally named Sassoon, managed Hong Kong. Solomon oversaw Canton before it declined. The company wasn't just a business, it was a family network where blood ties replaced legal contracts. Here's what's interesting. The Sassoons operated in a legal gray zone that was somehow both illegal and protected. Opium was banned in China, completely illegal. The Chinese emperor had made it a capital offense, but the British Navy actively protected the opium trade.
Karibu sana Jiba Jaba, hope you're doing great today.
British gunboats patrolled Chinese waters specifically to ensure opium ships could operate, so David was breaking Chinese law with British military protection. The contradiction was the point. The British government officially opposed the opium trade, claimed it was a private enterprise, nothing to do with Her Majesty's government. But when Chinese authorities seized opium or arrested dealers, British warships responded with bombardment. David understood this hypocrisy perfectly and exploited it ruthlessly. By 1850, David Sassoon and Sons was moving approximately 4,000 chests of opium per year into China. Each chest weighed about 140 pounds. That's 560,000 pounds of opium annually. The profit margin? Roughly 400%. You bought opium in India for $300 per chest. You sold it in Shanghai for $200 per chest. Sometimes more if supply tightened. Do the math. 4,000 chests at $900 profit per chest equals 3.6 million in annual profits. In 1850 dollars, that's equivalent to roughly $120 million annually in today's money, from one commodity, from one family business. But the Sassoons weren't satisfied with opium alone. They were building something bigger, a trading empire that used opium profits to finance legitimate businesses. Cotton mills in Bombay, real estate in Hong Kong, banking operations, shipping beyond just opium routes. The cotton business was particularly clever. The Sassoons bought raw cotton from Indian growers, shipped it to Manchester on their own vessels, then imported finished textiles back to India and China for sale. They controlled both ends of the supply chain, made money on the raw export, made money on the finished import, and used the same ships that carried opium to carry cotton on return voyages. What most people miss is how David cultivated British support. He donated generously to British causes in India, funded schools, built synagogues that British officials attended, made himself indispensable to British governors who needed local knowledge and local networks. In 1853, David did something extraordinary. He funded the construction of the Masjid Bunda Railroad in Bombay, India's first passenger railway. Cost him a fortune, but it bought him something more valuable than money: legitimacy. The British press praised him as a civilizing force, a merchant prince bringing modernity to India, conveniently ignoring that his fortune came from addicting millions of Chinese. The truth was darker. Between 1840 and 1858, opium imports to China increased by 400%. The number of addicts grew from roughly 2 million to over 10 million.
Wow.
Entire regions of China saw their economies collapse as workers chose opium over food.
Praise.
Silver drained from China to pay for the drug. The Qing dynasty weakened, and fortunes like the Sassoons grew exponentially. David kept meticulous records. The family archives, now scattered between London and Mumbai, show he understood exactly what he was doing. Letters to his sons discuss market cultivation, which meant creating new addicts. Talk about suppressing local competition, which meant collaborating with British authorities to eliminate Chinese dealers who didn't buy from the Sassoons. One letter from 1851 is particularly chilling. David writes to Elias in Shanghai, "The recent enforcement action by British Patrol has cleared the market of irregular suppliers. Our prices have risen 23% as predicted. Recommend maintaining current volume until local production attempts are suppressed." Translation: the British Navy had just destroyed Chinese opium dealers, creating a supply shortage that let the Sassoons raise prices and increase profits. By 1858, David Sassoon was the richest man in Bombay. His mansion, Sans Souci, overlooked the harbour. British governors attended his dinners. His sons married into other prominent Baghdadi Jewish families, creating an interconnected merchant aristocracy. And the Sassoon trading empire controlled an estimated 70% of the opium trade between India and China. 70%. Think about that. One family, one commodity, near total market dominance. But David knew something crucial. Empires built on single commodities are fragile. Opium had made them rich. But Shanghai was about to make them invincible. When David died in 1864 at age 72, he left an empire worth approximately 500,000, roughly $75 million in today's money. His sons divided the business. Abdullah took Bombay operations, Elias took Shanghai. And it was Elias, quiet and methodical, who would transform Shanghai from a treaty port into the Sassoon family's greatest achievement. Because Shanghai wasn't just another trading post, Shanghai was the future, and the Sassoons were about to own it. Chapter 3. Shanghai Arrival. Shanghai in 1845 wasn't a city. It was mud, literally. The Bund, that famous waterfront that would become Asia's most valuable real estate, was a riverbank covered in reeds, where Chinese fishermen pulled boats onto the shore. The total foreign population was maybe 50 people. There were no buildings, no infrastructure, no government beyond a confused Chinese magistrate who didn't understand why the British treaty suddenly gave foreigners the right to live there. Elias Sassoon arrived in this chaos and saw opportunity. Look, you need to understand the Treaty of Nanking's implications. When Britain defeated China in the First Opium War, they didn't just want Hong Kong. They wanted treaty ports, cities where foreigners could live, trade, and operate under their own laws. Shanghai was one of 5, but unlike Canton, which had centuries of trading tradition, Shanghai was new, undefined, up for grabs. The British established the Shanghai International Settlement, north of the old Chinese city, literally drew lines on a map and declared, "This is foreign territory. Chinese law doesn't apply. You report to a consular government run by foreigners." And in this legal vacuum, the Sassoons built their empire. Elias arrived with capital, connections, and a clear mandate from David: establish a permanent Sassoon presence before competitors understand Shanghai's potential. His first office was a wooden shack on the Bund. 4 rooms, dirt floor. But the location was perfect, right at the intersection of where the Huangpu River met the Yangtze, the main artery into China's interior. The initial business was pure opium. Ships from Bombay would arrive carrying chests of Patna and Benares opium. Elias would store them in Sassoon warehouses, then distribute to Chinese compradors, middlemen who handled the actual sale to addicts and dens. The Sassoons never directly sold to Chinese consumers. Too risky, too visible. Instead, they supplied the network, controlled the flow, owned the infrastructure. By 1850, Elias had established multiple opium warehouses along the Huangpu River, built a proper office building on the Bund, stone construction, 2 stories, prominently displaying the Sassoon name in English, Hebrew, and Chinese. Employed a staff of 30 people, mostly Parsis and Baghdadi Jews brought from India. What's interesting is how the Sassoons positioned themselves socially. They weren't just merchants, they were community builders. Elias donated funds for Shanghai's first synagogue in 1850, hosted dinners for British consular officials, married Sarah Heim, daughter of another prominent Baghdadi Jewish merchant, creating family alliances that strengthened trading networks.
I think they are jibba jabba. Yes, my answer to your question would be yes, literally, because I think if you look at it it's like saying the same people who control the world, they control China. I don't know if it answers your question correctly, but I'd say yes.
But the real transformation came after 1853. That year, a massive rebellion, the Taiping Rebellion, erupted in China. Rebels captured Nanjing, threatened Shanghai. Millions died. The Qing dynasty tottered on the brink of collapse, and in the chaos, the Sassoons made their most important decision. They stopped being just opium traders and became real estate developers. Here's the thing, war is terrifying for most people. For the Sassoons, it was a buying opportunity. As Chinese fled Shanghai's old city, and wealthy Chinese merchants desperately needed safe haven, the international settlement offered protection. Foreign gunboats patrolled the waterfront. Foreign troops guarded the settlement borders. If you had money and wanted safety, you moved to the foreign concessions. Elias started buying land. Lots of it. Entire city blocks for prices that seem absurd now, a few $100s per acre. But this was swampland, undeveloped mud that needed extensive drainage and construction. Most merchants thought he was crazy. Why invest in construction when you could flip opium for 400% margins? Because Elias understood something they didn't. Shanghai was about to explode. The treaty ports weren't temporary arrangements, they were permanent. The British weren't leaving. And as China modernized or was forced to modernize, Shanghai would become the gateway, the place where East met West, where Chinese merchants did business with foreigners, where capital flowed. By 1860, the Sassoon real estate portfolio in Shanghai was worth more than their opium inventory. They owned warehouses, office buildings, residential properties. They leased to other foreign trading houses. They became essentially Shanghai's landlords. But they didn't abandon opium, not even close. Between 1858 and 1880, opium imports to China increased from roughly 4,000 tons annually to over 6,500 tons. The Sassoons controlled the majority. Their ships, now numbering over 30 vessels, shuttled constantly between India and China. The profits were astronomical. One contemporary account from 1865 describes a single Sassoon opium auction in Shanghai. The crowd gathered early. Compradors and dealers packed into the Sassoon go-down. Elias Sassoon presided personally, his voice steady, as he auctioned 500 chests in 3 hours. The total sale exceeded 600,000 tiles of silver, roughly $800,000 in American currency. Think about that. $500,000 in profit from a single auction. In 1865, that's roughly $9 million in today's money, from 3 hours of selling opium. The moral questions were obvious. Chinese officials repeatedly protested. Chinese scholars wrote treatises on how opium was destroying their country. The emperor issued edicts, useless, unenforceable edicts, banning the trade. But the Sassoons had British military protection. As long as Britain wanted the opium trade to continue, it would continue. Elias handled these contradictions by simply refusing to acknowledge them. In public, he spoke about bringing commerce and civilization to China, about building infrastructure, about his charitable work funding hospitals and schools. The opium? That was never mentioned in polite company. What nobody knew was how the family was positioning for the next phase. Elias's nephew, Albert Abdullah David Sassoon, known as Abdullah, had returned from Oxford, educated, anglicized, and ambitious. Unlike his father and uncles, Abdullah was completely British in mannerism and outlook. He wore British suits, spoke English primarily, married a British woman, and he saw that the future of the Sassoon fortune wasn't just opium, it was legitimacy. Abdullah began pushing the family to diversify, invest in cotton mills, banking, shipping legitimate cargo, use the opium profits to build respectable businesses that could outlast the drug trade. This created tension. The older generation, David's sons, had built everything on opium. They understood it, trusted it, knew how to manipulate that market. Diversification meant risk, meant learning new industries. But by 1867, when David Sassoon died, the writing was on the wall. China was slowly getting stronger. The Qing dynasty was implementing reforms, building its own military. Eventually, maybe not soon, but eventually, they would have the power to actually enforce opium bans. The British might not always be willing to fight wars over drug trafficking. The family split. Some members wanted to maximize opium profits while they could. Others wanted to transition to legitimate businesses. The compromise was both. Keep the opium flowing, but invest the profits in mills, real estate, and banking. By 1870, the Sassoons owned 12 cotton mills in India, employed over 20,000 workers, and were Shanghai's largest property owners. The opium trade continued, but it was no longer their only business. They were becoming slowly a diversified trading empire. And Shanghai was becoming the Paris of the East. The Bund was transforming from mudflats to stone buildings, electric lights, hotels, banks. The Sassoons owned much of it, and they were just getting started. Chapter 4. Opium Empire. Between 1870 and 1895, the Sassoon family reached the absolute peak of their opium dominance. These 25 years represent the most profitable, most powerful, and most morally indefensible period of the family empire. The numbers are staggering. By 1880, China was importing approximately 6,500 tons of opium annually. The Sassoons controlled an estimated 70% of this trade. That's 4,550 tons of opium, moving through Sassoon warehouses, Sassoon ships, Sassoon distribution networks every single year. Let me put this in perspective. Each ton of opium could supply roughly 15,000 addicts for a year. So the Sassoons were supplying, directly or indirectly, opium for approximately 68 million addict years annually. China's population was about 400 million. That means the Sassoons were actively involved in maintaining addiction for roughly 15% of China's entire population. 15%. One family, one drug, millions of ruined lives. The operation was sophisticated. The Sassoons didn't just ship raw opium and hope for sales. They had developed an entire ecosystem. First, production control. By the 1870s, the Sassoons had representatives embedded directly with opium growers in Patna and Benares. They provided financing, seeds, equipment. In exchange, growers were locked into exclusive selling agreements. The Sassoons bought their entire harvest. This meant they could regulate supply, restrict it when they wanted to push prices up, flood the market when they wanted to destroy competitors. Second, quality standardization. The Sassoons created a grading system for opium. First-grade Patna became the premium product, high morphine content, consistent quality, packaged in distinctive Sassoon chests with the family seal. Chinese compradors knew Sassoon opium was reliable. This branding mattered enormously in a market filled with adulterated product. Third, financial infrastructure. The Sassoons established banking operations that financed the entire opium pipeline. They gave credit to Chinese compradors, accepted payment in multiple currencies, hedged exchange rate risks. They weren't just selling drugs, they were operating a full-service financial system built around narcotics. Fourth, political protection. This is where it gets really dark. The Sassoons maintained extremely close relationships with British officials. They hosted governors, donated to British causes, and in exchange, British gunboats made sure Sassoon opium shipments were never disrupted. One incident from 1875 shows how this worked. A reformist Chinese official in Jiangsu province began aggressively enforcing opium bans. He arrested Chinese dealers who sold Sassoon product, seized Sassoon warehouses. The British consul in Shanghai filed a formal protest. When the Chinese official refused to back down, British warships appeared off the coast. The official was removed. The warehouses were returned. Business resumed. The Sassoons didn't even have to request intervention.
This is so interesting.
The British government did it automatically because the opium trade generated so much customs revenue.
Power, literally. Power. What power can do is crazy.
That funding British colonial administration depended on it. Here's what's twisted. While poisoning millions with opium, the Sassoons were simultaneously celebrated as philanthropists and civilizers. In 1872, Abdullah Sassoon was knighted by Queen Victoria. The newspapers praised his contributions to Anglo-Indian commerce. The opium trade, barely mentioned. Instead, the coverage focused on his donations to hospitals, schools, libraries. The Sassoon family cultivated this dual image meticulously. They built the Sassoon dock in Bombay, a massive infrastructure project that employed thousands. They funded the David Sassoon Library and Reading Room, still standing in Mumbai today. They donated to Jewish charities across the British Empire. Every act of philanthropy was public, celebrated, immortalized in marble plaques bearing the Sassoon name. The opium? That happened quietly, in warehouses, on ships, in the account books that only family members saw. By 1885, the Sassoon business empire was worth an estimated $2.5 million, approximately $375 million in today's money. But the real wealth was in assets, the ships, the warehouses, the mills, the real estate. Shanghai properties alone were worth millions, and they were appreciating rapidly as the city grew. Shanghai's population had exploded from 50,000 in 1845 to over 600,000 by 1890. The international settlement was booming. Western businesses were flooding in, banks, trading houses, insurance companies, and they all needed property. The Sassoons owned it, leased it, controlled it. The family was also evolving. The third generation, David's grandchildren, were now running operations. Edward Sassoon had taken over the Indian businesses. Jacob Sassoon managed banking. And Victor Sassoon, born in 1881, was being groomed to take over Shanghai operations. What's interesting is how the family maintained unity. Most family businesses fragment by the third generation.
That's true.
The Sassoons had a system. Everything was owned by David Sassoon and Sons, the original partnership. Profits were distributed according to complicated formulas based on seniority and contribution. Nobody could sell their share without family approval. It was a private empire, accountable to nobody outside the family. But cracks were appearing. China was changing. The Qing dynasty, humiliated by defeats in the Opium Wars, was attempting modernization, building railroads, telegraph lines, modern armies. And increasingly, Chinese officials were arguing that opium was a national security threat that had to be stopped. In 1890, Chinese domestic opium production had started competing with imports. Chinese farmers in Yunnan and Sichuan provinces were growing their own opium. Lower quality, but much cheaper, and without import tariffs. The Sassoon market share was still dominant, but for the first time it was being challenged not by foreign competitors, but by Chinese production. The Sassoons' response was to double down on Shanghai real estate. Between 1890 and 1900, they invested millions in construction projects, office buildings, hotels, apartment blocks. The Sassoon House on the Bund became a landmark, massive, modern, housing both offices and luxury apartments. They bought entire neighborhoods in the Hongqiu district. The calculation was clear. Opium might eventually decline, but Shanghai's real estate would only increase in value. The city was becoming China's financial capital, its industrial center, the place where modern China was being born, and the Sassoons owned huge chunks of it. By 1895, annual opium revenues for the Sassoons had actually started to decline slightly, down from peak profits in the 1880s, but real estate income was surging. Rental income from Shanghai properties alone exceeded $500,000 annually. The family was transitioning slowly from drug lords to landlords. But here's the thing. They never stopped selling opium. Even as they diversified, even as they built legitimate businesses, the opium trade continued because it was still enormously profitable and because they could. British protection continued. Chinese enforcement remained weak, and millions of addicts needed their supply. One historical record from 1895 shows a typical Sassoon shipment. 3 ships carrying 800 chests of opium departed Calcutta for Shanghai. The moral reckoning never came, not for the Sassoons, not in their lifetime. They died wealthy, honored, respected. Abdullah Sassoon died in 1896, lauded in obituaries as a merchant prince and great philanthropist. The millions of Chinese opium addicts whose lives were destroyed funding that philanthropy weren't mentioned. But the empire's dominance was about to be tested, because the 20th century was coming, and with it, Wars, revolutions, and changes that would shake even the mighty Sassoon Empire to its foundation. Chapter 5. Family Fractures. By 1870, the Sassoon Empire faced its greatest threat, not from Chinese authorities, not from British competitors, from itself. David Sassoon had died in 1864, leaving behind a business worth approximately $500,000 and 8 sons who each believed they deserved to run it. The partnership agreement David had created, meticulously designed to keep the family unified, was about to be tested, and it was about to fail spectacularly. The problem was structural. David had built an empire that required absolute unity. Every branch of the business, Bombay operations, Shanghai trading, the opium warehouses, the shipping fleet, the cotton mills, was interconnected. Profits from opium financed the mills. Mills provided legitimate cover for the trading operations. The shipping fleet served everything. Pull one thread and the entire fabric could unravel. But David's sons had different visions for the future and different levels of attachment to the source of their wealth. Abdullah Sassoon, the eldest son who inherited control of the Bombay headquarters, wanted to maintain the traditional model, keep the opium flowing, maximize profits. The British Empire protected the trade. China was too weak to stop it, so why change what worked? Abdullah was a conservative, traditional in dress, orthodox in religion, suspicious of Western education. He saw the family business as David had, a sacred trust to be preserved exactly as built. Elias Sassoon, running Shanghai operations, agreed with his brother, but for different reasons. Elias had spent decades building the distribution networks in China. He knew every comprador, every warehouse, every smuggling route. His entire expertise was in opium. Diversifying meant abandoning the knowledge that made him valuable, so he pushed to expand the opium trade, open new markets in interior China, undercut domestic Chinese production, increase market share even as total volume might decline. But then there was Albert Abdullah David Sassoon, universally called Abdullah the Younger, to distinguish him from his uncle. Born in 1818, educated partially in England, Abdullah the Younger represented the next generation, and he had radically different ideas. Abdullah the Younger looked at the opium trade and saw a ticking time bomb. Not immediately. He wasn't naive about the profits. But long-term, he believed the trade was unsustainable. International pressure was building. China was slowly modernizing. Eventually, the British government would stop protecting opium traders because the diplomatic cost would exceed the benefits. When that happened, families whose entire wealth depended on opium would be destroyed. His solution: diversify aggressively. Use current opium profits to build businesses that could outlast the drug trade. Cotton mills, real estate, banking, legitimate shipping. Make the Sassoon name synonymous with commerce, not narcotics. This created immediate conflict. Diversification required capital that would otherwise be profits distributed to family members. Abdullah the Younger wanted to reinvest 60–70% of annual profits into new ventures. His uncles wanted to take their distributions and maintain their lifestyles. The fights were brutal. Family meetings in Bombay devolved into screaming matches. Letters between Shanghai and Bombay dripped with barely concealed contempt. At one point in 1867, Elias wrote to Abdullah, "You speak of legitimacy like a man ashamed of his father's work. David built this empire on trade the British Empire sanctions. Your cowardice disguised as strategy will destroy what took decades to build." Abdullah the Younger fired back, "I speak of survival. You speak of pride in a business that makes us wealthy criminals in Chinese eyes. When the British abandon us, and they will, your Shanghai warehouses will be ashes and our family will be penniless." The breaking point came in 1867. Abdullah the Younger proposed a massive investment, $100,000 to build modern cotton mills in Bombay using the latest British machinery. The mills would be the largest in India, employing thousands, producing textiles for both Indian and Chinese markets. The return on investment would take years, but once established, the mills would generate steady profits independent of opium. His uncles rejected it. Too expensive, too risky, too much capital tied up in unproven ventures when opium was generating 400% returns. So Abdullah the Younger did something unprecedented. He split from the family business. In 1867, he established E.D. Sassoon and Company, a separate firm using his middle name, Elias David, to distinguish it from David Sassoon and Sons. He took his personal capital, borrowed extensively, and pursued his diversification strategy independently. Some younger family members joined him. Most stayed with the traditional firm. This wasn't just a business split. This was a family civil war. The two firms immediately became competitors. E.D. Sassoon and Company started buying property that David Sassoon and Sons wanted, undercutting them on cotton prices, poaching their employees. The gentlemanly competition of fighting other British trading houses turned into vicious infighting between cousins. Both sides spread rumors. David Sassoon and Sons implied that Abdullah the Younger was financially unstable, over-leveraged, destined for bankruptcy. E.D. Sassoon and Company whispered that the old firm was morally bankrupt, living on borrowed time, unable to adapt. Chinese compradors and British merchants watched in amazement as the Sassoon Empire tore itself apart. But here's what's fascinating. Both strategies worked, at least initially. David Sassoon and Sons, under Abdullah the Elder's conservative management, continued to dominate the opium trade. Between 1867 and 1880, they actually increased market share as smaller competitors failed. The opium profits remained extraordinary. The family members who stayed with the traditional firm became enormously wealthy. Meanwhile, E.D. Sassoon and Company's diversification strategy also succeeded.
I thought the lights was off.
Built his confidence. They were profitable within
I told you to buy a new phone. You never check your phone for shit.
5 years.
Buy a new phone.
He invested heavily in Shanghai real estate, buying entire blocks when prices were low. He established banking operations that financed Chinese and British merchants. By 1880, E.D. Sassoon and Company was worth approximately $300,000, built entirely in 13 years without relying primarily on opium. The family split created something unexpected, competition that pushed both firms to excellence. David Sassoon and Sons couldn't afford to look complacent, while their cousins succeeded with a different model. E.D. Sassoon and Company couldn't afford to fail because the traditional firm would never let them forget it. But the human cost was devastating. Family gatherings became impossible. Weddings and funerals turned into cold, formal affairs where branches of the family barely spoke. The tight-knit Baghdadi Jewish community that David had cultivated fragmented. Some families allied with David Sassoon and Sons, others with E.D. Sassoon and Company. The social fabric David had built to support his business empire was shredding. The religious community particularly suffered. David had been a major patron of Bombay's synagogues. After the split, both firms donated, but competitively. If David Sassoon and Sons funded a new Torah scroll, E.D. Sassoon and Company would fund renovations. The synagogues benefited financially, but became uncomfortable battlegrounds for family pride. There were also attempts at reconciliation. In 1872, several family elders tried to mediate, proposed merging the firms back together, offered Abdullah the Younger significant control in exchange for reunification. The negotiations lasted months, ultimately failed. Neither side would compromise on fundamental strategy, opium dependence versus diversification. The split also had unintended consequences in Shanghai. With two Sassoon firms competing, they drove up prices for everything. Real estate that should have been negotiated cooperatively became bidding wars. Chinese compradors played the firms against each other, demanding better terms from both. The Sassoon advantage, operating as a unified network, disappeared. Other British trading houses noticed. Jardine Matheson, the Sassoons' primary competitor, started gaining ground. When the Sassoons were unified, they could coordinate to control prices and squeeze competitors. When they were split, Jardine could exploit the divisions. By 1875, Jardine Matheson had increased their opium market share from roughly 15% to 25%. The Sassoons, combined across both firms, still controlled about 65%, but they'd lost ground. The decline was entirely self-inflicted. Individual family members tried to maintain relationships across the split. Cousins who'd grown up together didn't want permanent estrangement, but the business rivalry made friendship nearly impossible. If you worked for one firm, you had access to confidential information, prices, strategies, contacts that the other firm desperately wanted. Family dinners became intelligence-gathering operations. One particularly painful incident occurred in 1876. A young Sassoon working for David Sassoon and Sons became engaged to a young woman whose family was close to E.D. Sassoon and Company. Both firms pressured him to break the engagement. The wedding would create a connection across the divide that could leak information. He married her anyway. Both firms effectively disowned him. He left the family business entirely, moved to London and lived comfortably but outside the Sassoon empire. The split also revealed generational tensions. The older generation, David's actual sons, were dying off. Abdullah the Elder died in 1896. Elias died in 1880. As they passed, control shifted to grandchildren who'd never known David personally. For them, the split wasn't a betrayal of family unity. It was just business reality. These younger Sassoons were also more westernized. Many were educated in England, spoke English primarily, married outside the Baghdadi Jewish community. They saw the family business as a commercial enterprise, not a sacred trust. This made them more pragmatic about potential reunification. If merging made financial sense, why not? By 1880, serious merger talks started again. The opium trade was clearly declining. International pressure was building. China's domestic production was undercutting imports. Both Sassoon firms faced the same challenge: adapt or die. Maybe competition had run its course, but egos remained. Neither side wanted to admit the other had been right. David Sassoon and Sons insisted any merger recognize them as the primary entity. E.D. Sassoon and Company would be absorbed, not merged as equals. Abdullah the Younger's successors refused. They'd built an empire without opium dependence. Why should they subordinate to a firm still relying on narcotics? The negotiations collapsed again in 1882. What's interesting is how this split shaped the firm's different fates in the 20th century. David Sassoon and Sons, still heavily dependent on opium, struggled as that trade declined. They diversified too slowly. When opium revenues crashed in the early 1900s, the firm shrank dramatically. By 1920, David Sassoon and Sons was a shadow of its former self. E.D. Sassoon and Company, having diversified decades earlier, weathered the transition better. Their cotton mills thrived. Their Shanghai real estate appreciated enormously. When Victor Sassoon, Abdullah the Younger's grandson, took control in the 1920s, he was running a diversified empire that didn't depend on opium. This is why Victor could dominate Shanghai's property market, while David Sassoon and Sons faded. In retrospect, Abdullah the Younger was right. His strategic vision proved correct, but he paid for that vindication with permanent family estrangement. The split also affected how the Sassoon story was remembered. Because there were two firms with similar names, historians often confused them. Achievements of one were attributed to the other. The family tree became impossible for outsiders to follow. This confusion helped the family later when the opium connection became embarrassing. Nobody could clearly track which Sassoons profited from which activities. There were also periodic rumors of secret coordination, that the split was partially theater, that behind closed doors, the firms shared information and coordinated strategy. These rumors were false. The split was absolutely real, but they persisted because people couldn't believe a family would actually destroy its own unity. By 1890, the generation that remembered the split's origins was dying. Younger family members knew they were supposed to maintain the rivalry, but increasingly didn't understand why. They were competing against cousins they barely knew over grievances from before they were born. Some reconciliation happened at individual levels. Cousins would meet privately, attend each other's social events, even discuss business informally. But the firms remained separate. The institutional split, once created, had become permanent. The tragedy is that David Sassoon had designed the original partnership specifically to prevent this. He'd seen other trading families fragment and fail. He'd created elaborate agreements to keep his sons unified. But he couldn't legislate personality. couldn't force his descendants to share his vision, couldn't prevent the ambitions and egos that ultimately tore the empire apart. By 1900, the Sassoon name appeared on two distinct firms with different strategies, different leadership, and minimal cooperation. Both were wealthy, both were influential, but together they could have been unstoppable. Instead, they spent decades fighting each other instead of dominating their markets. And this internal conflict, as much as external changes, determined how the Sassoon Empire ultimately evolved and eventually collapsed. Because when the real threats came, Japanese invasion, communist revolution, the Sassoons faced them divided, not unified. The family fracture that began in 1867 never truly healed, and that fracture, hidden beneath the surface of continued wealth and influence, was a crack that would eventually shatter the entire empire. Chapter 6: Total Domination. The period from 1900 to 1920 should have been disaster for the Sassoons. China's Qing dynasty collapsed in 1911. World War I disrupted global trade. Anti-opium movements gained strength internationally. The British government, facing pressure, began publicly distancing itself from the opium trade. Instead, the Sassoons became richer and more powerful than ever. How? By being more ruthless than anyone else. Victor Sassoon took over Shanghai operations in 1924, but his influence started much earlier. Born in 1881 into staggering wealth, Victor was different from his ancestors. David Sassoon had been a pious refugee. Elias had been a careful trader. Abdullah had been a philanthropist seeking British acceptance. Victor was a playboy capitalist with no illusions about the source of his wealth. He walked with a cane after a plane crash in World War I left him partially disabled. He raced horses, kept mistresses, threw legendary parties, and ran the Sassoon business empire with absolute ruthless efficiency. The opium trade was dying, slowly but undeniably. International pressure had forced Britain to sign agreements limiting opium exports. China's new Republican government, desperate for legitimacy, was cracking down harder. Chinese domestic production was undercutting imports. By 1917, official opium imports to China had dropped to roughly 2,000 tons annually, less than a third of peak levels. But Victor understood something crucial. The dying opium trade had already served its purpose. It had generated the capital needed to dominate Shanghai's real economy. And Shanghai was about to experience the most explosive growth in its history. Between 1920 and 1937, Shanghai's population doubled to 3.5 million people.
Pause it. This is what China calls the period of Western domination. They call it the humiliation period. See, unlike Africans took them in and loved them and want to fuck them and all that stupid shit. The Chinese call this the humiliation period. And they had to right that wrong. That's what they call it doing now. They had to right that wrong. All these foreigners came in and got rich off their backs. All these Jays, all these people, it's all Chinese business. They got rich off Chinese people's backs and their misery by importing drugs and making them drug addicts. So they remember that. So this is called the century of humiliation. That's what China call it. They don't call it, oh, people coming in and they're making us develop and all that old stupid shit the Africans do. The Chinese call this the age of humiliation. Look this up, Joe, real quick. Go to Google and say what years were the age of humiliation in China? That's what they call it. they don't call no it's our development. They coming to teach us shit and all this crazy stuff. They call it the age of humiliation. We've been dominated by foreigners and treated like shit. And we're not going to stay down like this forever. The age of humiliation.
Says the age of humiliation in China, also called the century of humiliation, generally refers to the period from 1839 to 1949.
Exactly. So this is the same. Go ahead, Joey.
Yeah, starting with the first Opium War and ending with the establishment of the People's Republic of China, or China's emergence as a major power.
1949. Yeah, that's 1949. So what Joby's showing, this is the age of what they call, you see all these great things they done, blah blah. Chinese are called that the age of humiliation, the century of humiliation. They said these people came, stole our country, stole our wealth, and got rich off our backs. They don't put that in their goofy documentaries. Oh, how they got rich and blah blah blah. How they exploited other people and got rich off their backs. See, China, I give them credit. They identify it as what it's supposed to be identified as, not some bullshit like the Africans. When they came and brought us development and civilization. What are you talking about? You out of your damn mind. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Joe.
so usually this documentary is talking about the Sassoon family, which is a Jewish family, and how they took control, or rather controlled the opium trade, and how they destroyed the Chinese community, many families and lives, and literally how the dynasty kept on rolling to where we are.
Manufacturing center.
Are these the cats? Hold on. Are these the Sassoons? Are these the same guys that's responsible for the jeans that became famous too, Joby?
Yes.
Wow. Wow. Tell you can't make this shit up.
Cultural hub. The Paris of the East wasn't marketing, it was reality. Art Deco skyscrapers, jazz clubs, international banks, the first Chinese stock exchange, cinema houses, universities. Shanghai had more cars than any other Asian city, more telephones, more electricity consumption. And the Sassoons owned massive pieces of it all. Victor's strategy was simple but brilliant. Use the remaining opium profits and accumulated capital to buy trophy assets. Not just any real estate, the most visible, most prestigious, most profitable properties in Shanghai. In 1926, Victor opened the Cathay Hotel on the Bund. This wasn't just a hotel, this was a statement. 10 stories of luxury, Art Deco masterpiece, the finest accommodations in Asia. Noel Coward wrote Private Lives while staying there. Charlie Chaplin visited. Wallace Simpson and Edward VIII honeymooned in the penthouse suite. The Cathay became the symbol of Shanghai's glamorous cosmopolitan identity.
Yeah, Edward VIII.
The hotel cost $500,000.
But remember, the Chinese were not allowed to go in there. They weren't allowed to take their raggedy asses in there. And these hotels that were owned by other people inside their country. They were allowed to keep their slanty-eyed ass out there. They could be servants. Same way they do Africans. They can be servants, but they wasn't the ones having the fun. You got Edward VIII. That's the king of England. Ain't it funny? All these white people just taking over China, living good, making houses, getting rich off everybody. Told you, parasitical. Everywhere they go, it's parasitical. Everywhere they go, they're parasites. Everywhere they go, it's parasitical. Steal people's shit, get rich, and leave everybody all fucked up. Go ahead, Joe.
Roughly $75 million in today's money. But it generated enormous returns. Room rates were astronomical. The top floor restaurant became where Shanghai's elite, both foreign and Chinese, did business. The bar was legendary. Victor often held court there personally, schmoozing with taipans, generals, gangsters, and socialites. But the Cathay was just the flagship. Victor owned dozens of properties: the Embankment Building, Metropole Hotel, Grosvenor House, Hamilton House, entire blocks of apartments in the French concession. The Sassoon real estate portfolio in Shanghai was worth an estimated $3 million by 1930.
Pause it, Joby. Pause it. See what he said? He says the French concession. You guys know what that means? That means the French came over and took over to us a concession. They said, listen, we're going to take all this shit and we're going to own it. You Chinese not going to do shit about it. See how nice white people, the concession. In the French concession part of Shanghai, that means they came in and said, we're going to take it over and then shit. See, without a military, nothing you can do about it. So you're going to give us the same way the British took over Hong Kong, China, right? We're going to take the shit. So all these European powers were coming just stealing shit. They thought of the French concession. Concession means they stole it. They said, nothing you're going to do about it. We're going to control it and own it. Go ahead, Joe.
Approximately $450 million today. Here's what most people don't know. Victor wasn't just collecting rent. He was manipulating the entire Shanghai property market. The Sassoons controlled so much real estate that they could influence prices across the city. When they bought, prices rose. When they sold, which was rare, prices dropped. They were too big to compete with. One example shows how this worked. In 1928, an American bank wanted to build headquarters on the Bund. They approached Victor about purchasing a Sassoon-owned lot. Victor quoted them an absurd price, 3 times market rate. They balked. tried to find alternative locations, but every prime site on the Bund was owned by either the Sassoons or their close associates. Eventually, the bank paid Victor's price. He'd essentially created a monopoly on Shanghai's most valuable land.
No.
Diversifying beyond.
Now pause that again. Now I told you, Shanghai. I told you guys years ago, Shanghai is where all the cats with the hats are going right now. But China's supposedly free. You got more cats with hats in Shanghai than any part of Asia. That's where they dominate. That's where they create. Where they created modern day China from. They run it. They own it. They still do. Just like them. They'll tell you, oh, the Communist Party. Oh, Deng Xiaoping. Whatever these poopy names they got. Run shit. They don't run a goddamn thing but their mouth. The cats with the hats never left. And they still control it today. Go ahead, Joe.
Real estate. The Sassoons invested heavily in Shanghai's cotton mills. By 1930, Sassoon controlled mills employed over 30,000 Chinese workers and produced roughly 15% of China's cotton textiles. They invested in utilities, electric power, water systems. They owned shares in the Shanghai Stock Exchange. They financed Chinese entrepreneurs through the Sassoon banking operations. Think about the transformation. 3 generations earlier, David Sassoon had been a refugee with nothing. Now his grandson controlled significant chunks of
he was a
China's
refugee with nothing, and the cats are always scheming, conniving. And that's what they do. And since you don't know that, they always come in poor, take over your country, and leave you all fucked up. China's are now working for them. Good luck.
His city's infrastructure employed tens of thousands and wielded influence that rivaled governments. But Victor maintained the family's original edge, willingness to operate in moral gray zones. While the opium trade was officially dying, Victor found new ways to profit from vice. He invested in Shanghai's nightclub district, financed casinos. His properties housed brothels, high-end establishments catering to wealthy foreigners and Chinese. Shanghai in the 1920s was called the Whore of the Orient, and the Sassoons profited from that reputation. Victor also cultivated relationships with Shanghai's criminal underworld. The Green Gang, Shanghai's most powerful triad, controlled gambling, prostitution, and what remained of the opium trade. Their leader, Du Yuesheng, was one of Shanghai's most feared men. Victor did business with him, attended his parties, used Green Gang muscle when necessary to resolve property disputes or enforce contracts. This alliance was mutually beneficial. The triads needed legitimate business fronts. The Sassoons needed enforcement muscle that operated outside British or Chinese law. Together they controlled vast swaths of Shanghai's shadow economy. One incident from 1931 illustrates this perfectly. A Chinese businessman refused to vacate a Sassoon-owned building after his lease expired. Legal eviction would take months. Victor mentioned the problem to Du Yuesheng at a dinner party. Within 48 hours, the tenant had voluntarily left. No violence was reported, but everyone understood what Green Gang persuasion meant. The Sassoons were also playing both sides of Chinese politics. When Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces took Shanghai in 1927, Victor immediately cultivated relationships with the new government. He hosted nationalist officials, made loans to Chiang's government, donated to nationalist causes. When Chiang married Sung Mei-ling from one of China's wealthiest families, Victor attended the wedding. But Victor also maintained relationships with the foreign powers, British, American, French, that controlled Shanghai's international settlement. He served on the Shanghai Municipal Council, advised the British consul, hosted visiting dignitaries. He was playing a complex game, being British enough for the British, Chinese enough for the Chinese, and loyal to nobody except Sassoon interests. The wealth was staggering. By 1935, Victor Sassoon's personal fortune was estimated at $8 million, approximately $1.2 billion in today's money. The broader Sassoon family controlled assets worth perhaps 3 times that. They owned property across Asia, Bombay, Calcutta, Hong Kong, Singapore. They had investments in London. They were truly global. Victor lived like it. His estate outside Shanghai, Eve's Ranch, spawned 170 acres. He bred championship racehorses. His stable won the Shanghai Race Club Championship 5 times in the 1930s. He owned a fleet of cars, traveled by private ship, through parties where champagne flowed like water and guest lists mixed Chinese warlords with European aristocrats. But underneath the glamour, Victor was watching China's political situation carefully. Japan had invaded Manchuria in 1931. Tensions were rising. Chinese nationalism was growing. The communists, though suppressed by Chiang Kai-shek, were gaining strength in rural areas. The international system that had protected foreign privileges in China for a century was cracking. Victor began quietly preparing exit strategies. He diversified investments outside China, moved liquid capital to British banks, maintained close relationships with British and American officials who might help evacuate assets if necessary. He partied like a playboy, but he planned like a survivor. In 1937, everything changed. Japanese forces attacked Shanghai. The Battle of Shanghai raged for 3 months. Over 250,000 Chinese soldiers and civilians died. The city was devastated. The international settlement remained technically neutral, a bizarre island of peace surrounded by war. But everyone knew it was temporary. Victor faced a choice: stay and bet on Shanghai's recovery, or start moving assets out. He chose both. Publicly, he remained optimistic, kept the Cathay Hotel operating, maintained his Shanghai properties. But privately, he was transferring capital, securing foreign accounts, preparing for the worst. What he couldn't know was just how bad the worst would be, because the war that was coming wouldn't just threaten the Sassoon Empire, it would destroy it completely. Chapter 7: War Profits. The Japanese invasion of Shanghai in 1937 should have been catastrophic for Victor Sassoon. Foreign property owners fled. Banks closed. The stock exchange suspended operations. Battle damage destroyed neighborhoods. The Chinese population that remained faced starvation and terror. Victor made money. Astonishing amounts of it. Here's how. The international settlement remained neutral territory for 4 years after the invasion. Japanese forces surrounded it, but didn't occupy it until after Pearl Harbor in 1941. This created a bizarre situation, a 2-square-mile bubble of foreign-controlled territory surrounded by Japanese-occupied China, where normal laws and commerce had completely collapsed. Shanghai became a refuge. Wealthy Chinese fleeing Japanese-controlled areas poured into the settlement with whatever portable wealth they could carry. European Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi Germany arrived by the thousands. Shanghai was one of the few cities that didn't require entry visas. Russian emigres, American adventurers, British traders who couldn't or wouldn't evacuate, they all crammed into the settlement. Real estate prices should have crashed. Supply exceeded demand. War surrounded the city. Instead, Victor pushed them higher. You see, desperate people with money will pay anything for safety. A cramped apartment in the international settlement meant protection from Japanese occupation. Victor owned hundreds of such apartments. He raised rents by 200%, sometimes 300%. Tenants paid because the alternative was Japanese military rule. One survivor account describes this perfectly. We arrived from Vienna with nothing but my mother's jewelry and my father's savings. The Sassoon rental agent demanded 6 months advance rent, at rates triple what we'd paid for our apartment in Vienna. We paid. What choice did we have? The Japanese were at the gates. Victor wasn't just profiting from rentals. He was buying distressed assets. Chinese businessmen, desperate to flee, would sell properties for pennies on the dollar, just to get cash they could carry. Victor bought them all. Office buildings, warehouses, entire blocks in the Chinese districts that had been abandoned. He paid cash, got massive discounts, waited for Shanghai to recover. The Cathay Hotel remained open throughout the war. It became the neutral meeting ground where Japanese officers, Chinese collaborators, Western diplomats and smugglers all mingled. Victor maintained strict neutrality. Anyone with money was welcome. The bar did record business. The restaurant was packed. Room rates doubled, then tripled. What most people don't understand about Victor's wartime operations is how systematically he monetized human desperation. This wasn't opportunistic profiteering. It was a calculated business strategy executed with cold precision. Between 1937 and 1941, approximately 20,000 Jewish refugees arrived in Shanghai, from Nazi-occupied Europe. Shanghai was literally the last option. The United States had closed its doors. Britain restricted immigration. Palestine had quotas. Australia, South Africa, Latin America all turned refugees away. Shanghai alone remained open because it didn't require visas. You could just show up. The refugees arrived with whatever they could carry. Many had been wealthy in Europe. Doctors, lawyers, business owners, academics. Now they were stateless, desperate, and completely dependent on whoever controlled Shanghai's housing. Victor controlled most of it, and he charged accordingly. The standard Sassoon apartment in 1936 rented for approximately 80 Shanghai dollars per month, roughly $25 US at the time. By 1939, with refugees flooding the city, Victor was charging 300 Shanghai dollars for the same apartments. Same buildings, same conditions, just a 275% price increase because demand exceeded supply. But here's what's particularly calculating. Victor created a tiered rental system specifically designed to extract maximum revenue from refugees at different wealth levels. Tier 1 were the luxury apartments in Sassoon House and the French concession properties. These went for 501,000 Shanghai dollars monthly. Only the wealthiest refugees could afford them. Families who'd managed to smuggle out substantial assets, usually in the form of diamonds, gold, or foreign currency. Victor knew exactly who these people were. His rental agents screened applicants carefully. If you had money, you got offered the premium properties. Tier 2 were the standard apartments in the Hongkou district, Shanghai's designated area for refugee housing. These were the 300 Shanghai dollar rentals. Middle-class refugees, families who had some savings but not fortunes, ended up here. The apartments were cramped, often housing 6 to 8 people in spaces designed for 2 to 3. But they were safe from the Japanese, and that's what mattered. Tier 3 were the subdivided tenements. Victor took existing apartments and carved them into smaller units. A 2-bedroom became 4 studio spaces. A living room became a sleeping room for 3 families. The total rent collected from one subdivided apartment often exceeded 1,000 Shanghai dollars monthly, far more than renting the original apartment, intact. The refugees in these spaces were the poorest, people who'd arrived with literally nothing, who relied on charity from refugee aid organizations to pay even these minimal rents. Victor collected rent from organizations like the Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, knowing they had no choice but to pay. The alternative was leaving refugees homeless, which would have been a humanitarian catastrophe. One refugee who survived this period later wrote, "We lived in what had been a storage closet. 7 of us, my parents, my siblings, and me. No windows, 1 door. We hung a sheet down the middle to create rooms. The rent was 40 Shanghai dollars monthly, more than my father had earned in a month as a lawyer in Berlin. But we paid it. Mr. Sassoon owned the building. There was nowhere else to go. Think about the math." Victor had approximately 800 residential properties in Shanghai by 1940. If even half were generating double or triple pre-war rents, that's 400 properties, x an extra 200 Shanghai dollars monthly, x 12 months, 960,000 Shanghai dollars in extra annual revenue. At 1940 exchange rates, that's roughly $300,000 US, equivalent to about $6.5 million today, from rent increases alone. During a humanitarian crisis, while families slept in closets, but Victor justified it internally with impeccable capitalist logic. He was providing housing. Without Sassoon properties, these refugees would be homeless. The prices were set by market forces, supply and demand. If he charged less, the apartments would be snapped up by whoever got there first, and equally desperate people would still be homeless. The price system allocated scarce housing to those who valued it most, i.e., could pay the most. This was efficient, rational, good economics. It was also morally grotesque. But Victor had long since separated business decisions from moral considerations. Victor's other major wartime profit source was currency manipulation. Shanghai in the late 1930s had one of the most chaotic currency situations in history. Multiple currencies circulated simultaneously, Chinese yuan rapidly inflating, Shanghai dollars pegged to silver, more stable, Japanese military yen forced into circulation in occupied areas, US dollars, scarce, highly valued. British pounds, also scarce, used for international transactions. Gold bars, the ultimate safe haven. Victor's banking operations let him play these currencies against each other. He'd accept rent payments in any currency, but the exchange rates he offered were deliberately unfavorable to tenants. Pay in devaluing yuan, and Victor would apply an exchange rate 15 to 20% worse than the official rate. Pay in scarce US dollars, and you'd get a slight premium. But Victor would immediately convert those dollars to pounds and move them to accounts in London, getting the dollars out of China before currency controls could trap them. One particularly clever scheme involved Japanese military yen. The Japanese occupation government forced Chinese businesses in occupied territories to accept military yen at par with Chinese yuan. But everyone knew military yen were essentially worthless outside Japanese-controlled areas. So they were printed by the Japanese army, backed by nothing, and would become completely valueless if Japan lost the war. Victor's agents would accept military yen from desperate Chinese businessmen who needed to convert them to something useful before they became worthless. Victor would offer exchange rates of 100 military yen for 40 Shanghai dollars, a massive discount. The businessmen would take it because 40 Shanghai dollars were better than potentially worthless military yen. Then Victor would use those military yen to pay expenses in Japanese-occupied territories. Bribes to Japanese officials, payments to suppliers, purchase of confiscated properties. He was converting worthless paper into real assets, using the currency's brief window of forced validity before its inevitable collapse. When Japan surrendered in 1945, people holding military yen lost everything. Victor had already converted his military yen holdings into property and goods months earlier. He lost nothing. The currency operations also served another purpose: capital flight. Victor needed to move wealth out of China in case the situation deteriorated further. But China had capital controls. You couldn't just transfer millions abroad without government permission. So Victor used a Hawala-style system through Sassoon banking operations. A wealthy Chinese businessman in Shanghai would deposit yuan with Victor's Shanghai bank. Victor would then arrange for an equivalent amount in pounds to be available to the businessman in London through the Sassoon banking house there. On paper, no money crossed borders. In reality, wealth was moving constantly. Victor charged 8 to 12% for these transactions, pure profit. And he was helping wealthy Chinese evade capital controls while simultaneously moving his own wealth to safety. By 1940, Victor had moved an estimated $1.5 million to London banks, roughly $225 million in today's money. Just in case Shanghai became completely untenable, Victor also profited massively from the black market, though he was careful to maintain plausible deniability. With normal trade routes destroyed and the international settlements surrounded, Shanghai's economy ran entirely on smuggling. Everything was smuggled: medicine, food, fuel, weapons, luxury goods. Opium, of course, heroin, morphine. Even people getting someone out of Japanese-occupied territory into the settlement cost money, and smugglers charged accordingly. Victor didn't directly participate in smuggling, too risky for someone of his prominence, but he financed it, provided warehouse space, laundered money through his banks, and took a cut of everything. Here's how it worked. A smuggler would need warehouse space to store contraband before distribution. Victor owned dozens of warehouses. He'd lease space to the smuggler at exorbitant rates, 3 to 5 times normal warehouse rents. The lease agreement would carefully not mention what was being stored. Victor maintained plausible deniability. If authorities raided the warehouse and found contraband, the smuggler would be arrested, not Victor. He was just a landlord. The smuggler would also need financing. Buying contraband in occupied territory, bribing Japanese guards to look the other way, paying boat captains to make dangerous runs, all this required capital. Victor's banking operations would provide loans at 15–25% interest. Short-term loans, 30–90 days. If you didn't pay back on time, the interest compounded viciously. Some smugglers defaulted. When they did, Victor would seize collateral, usually the contraband itself. Then he'd sell it through different channels, making the profit the smuggler should have made, plus recovering the loan. One particularly profitable arrangement involved medicine. Refugees and the Chinese population desperately needed medicine, antibiotics, anesthetics, surgical supplies. Normal supply chains were destroyed, hospitals were overwhelmed, people were dying from treatable conditions. Victor financed smuggling operations that brought medicine from Japanese-occupied areas or from neutral territories like Macau. The medicine would be stored in Sassoon warehouses. Then it would be sold at 500, 1,000% markups. A vial of penicillin that cost $2 wholesale would sell for $20 in Shanghai. Life-saving medicine became a luxury good. Was Victor directly selling the medicine? No, his agents and partners handled that, but he financed the operation, stored the product, and took a percentage, typically 30–40% of profits. When you're making 1,000% margins, giving Victor 30% still leaves enormous profit. The same system applied to food. Malnutrition was widespread in Shanghai by 1939. Rice prices skyrocketed. Vegetable supplies were erratic. The Chinese population in occupied territories was starving. The Japanese confiscated food for their military, leaving civilians with almost nothing. Smuggled rice from the Chinese interior could be sold at massive markups in Shanghai. Victor financed these operations, stored the rice in Sassoon warehouses, took his cut. Meanwhile, outside those warehouses, Chinese civilians starved because they couldn't afford the inflated prices.
Crazy.
One account from a refugee doctor describes visiting a Sassoon warehouse in 1940. I'd heard rumors of food supplies, went to investigate. The warehouse was full, bags of rice stacked to the ceiling, thousands of bags. I asked the guard if I could purchase some for the refugee hospital. He quoted a price that was astronomical, 10 times what rice should cost. I explained that people were dying. He shrugged, said if I couldn't pay, I should leave. Outside, I saw Chinese children, visibly malnourished, staring at the warehouse. All that food, all those hungry people. But no money means no food. Victor's response to such criticisms, when he bothered responding, was textbook capitalism. He hadn't created the shortage. He hadn't caused the war. He was simply operating businesses in a difficult environment. The high prices reflected genuine scarcity and risk. Smuggling was dangerous. Boats got intercepted, smugglers got arrested or killed. High prices compensated for high risk. Moreover, he'd argue, the black market was performing an essential service. Without smugglers, there would be no food, no medicine, no supplies at all. The black market, however inefficient and expensive, was better than nothing. His warehouses, his financing, his infrastructure, these enabled the smuggling that kept Shanghai functioning. This is technically true. The black market did provide goods that otherwise wouldn't exist. But that doesn't make profiteering from starvation and disease ethical. It just makes it economically rational. Victor's relationship with the Japanese occupation government was one of the most morally complicated aspects of his wartime activity. He walked an incredibly fine line, cooperating enough that the Japanese didn't cause him problems, but maintaining enough distance to preserve his British identity and post-war credibility. The Japanese wanted to use Sassoon properties for military purposes. Hotels for officer housing, warehouses for military supplies, office buildings for occupation administration. Victor could have refused, but refusal would have meant confiscation. The Japanese would simply seize what they wanted. So Victor negotiated. He leased properties to the Japanese at what he called market rates, but what were actually inflated prices. A building worth 500 Shanghai dollars monthly in rent would be leased to the Japanese military for $800. The Japanese paid because they wanted to maintain a veneer of legality. They were leasing, not stealing. This arrangement made Victor complicit in the occupation. Japanese officers planning operations against Chinese forces were housed in Sassoon hotels. Japanese military supplies were stored in Sassoon warehouses. The infrastructure Victor controlled enabled the occupation. But Victor framed it differently. He was protecting his property. The Japanese could have simply seized everything. By leasing instead, he maintained legal ownership and received payment. After the war, he'd still own the buildings. Owners who'd refused to cooperate had lost everything to outright confiscation. The moral problem is that this logic makes collaboration seem rational. Every property owner who cooperated with occupation forces used similar reasoning, and collectively, their cooperation made the occupation function more smoothly. Victor also maintained social relationships with Japanese officials. He attended dinners, hosted Japanese officers at the Cathay Hotel bar, exchanged pleasantries, never directly discussed politics, but maintained cordial relations. One particularly controversial incident occurred in 1940. A Japanese general requested a meeting with Victor. The general wanted to requisition the entire Cathay Hotel for use as Japanese military headquarters. Victor's response was masterful manipulation. He served tea, chatted about the general's family, admired the general's sword, asked about its history, built rapport, then gently explained that the Cathay Hotel served a valuable function as neutral ground. It was where Japanese officers could meet with Western diplomats, Chinese collaborators and business leaders in a setting that wasn't overtly military. Converting it to military headquarters would eliminate this valuable neutral space. The general considered this. Victor then offered an alternative. He would reserve an entire floor of the hotel for permanent Japanese military use at favorable rates. The Japanese would have dedicated space, but the hotel would remain technically civilian and continue serving its neutral function. The general agreed. Victor kept his hotel operating. The Japanese got their space, and Victor collected rent for accommodations he couldn't otherwise have sold Western guests. Weren't exactly flooding into Shanghai, but this meant Japanese military officers were living in the Cathay Hotel, planning operations there, meeting there. The hotel became effectively part of the occupation infrastructure. While maintaining its reputation as neutral ground, critics at the time, mostly Chinese who'd fled the occupation, accused Victor of outright collaboration. They pointed out that he was profiting from Japanese occupation.
Of course he was, of course he was. But I'm going to share the rest of the 30 remaining video of this to you guys what's happened previously with the other one that I was not able to share yesterday, that I was sharing on Monday. But this is complete power, literally. That is what I'm learning and what I've learned from this video, just watching this and the other one. This is complete power. This is power, literally. I can destroy you as a community if I want to with the drugs. I can take over your market. I can create wars between you, and as I watch you kill each other, I come and buy the whole land, recreate more. This is crazy. This is pure craziness and madness. And this is them literally. This is the same thing we are witnessing today, literally. This is still very much active. I mean, it's not dead. It's not. That's it's not history. Like history is not. It's not like history is things that are really like they are things that stopped happening. These are things that are still very much active in today's world.
You know why?
Mm-hmm.
Because why? Because they work.
Of course, exactly. Create monopoly, manipulate people's mind. This is just super, super crazy. But let me know as we literally get wind up. I'm gonna wind up with the video I said I'm gonna share, but I couldn't share before Keith landing here about the a taxi driver who was assaulted in Dubai. But before that, in the chat, Joe Mosquito, Jiba Jaba, I see Joe Mosquito. Let me tell you, if you find a woman who, let's say for me, if you take me on a date and expect me to eat ugali with a fork, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna embarrass you. Okay, I'm gonna wash my hands and eat my ugali with my hands. I'm not using no goddamn fork. Okay. Right at the studio, trust me, I eat with my hands. Like I don't have time to keep using the spoon. I just wash my hands and I eat my rice with my hands or spaghetti.
And you better bring Joe to London. That's where you get this savage from Africa.
Yeah, because they're telling me that is not very lady of me the way I've taken water. I'm supposed to be taking sips, not drinking like a beer. It's water, god damn it. I'm thirsty. I'm sorry I don't have aesthetic Joe Mosquito. That's what I'm saying. Today I'm giving Velma. Like you remember Velma from Scooby-Doo? She was just, That's me.
What does Grandma from Scooby Doo got to do with anything, Joe?
Yeah, because she was just always there. She doesn't have time to ask that like the other lady. I can't remember her
Oh
name.
yeah.
The other guy was
Velma was the ugly one, though. You're not the ugly one. Velma was the ugly one. No one cared about that.
not the ugliness part.
I
But yeah,
know.
I don't carry that nowhere. But as we wind up, I see Jibba Jabba earlier was asking, I think I did answer your question when you asked about China being the Jewish front country today. Yes, and I think even Keith had even mentioned that earlier today on my show, saying how China was created and who are really behind it. The same people. And then he also says influence because of so-called communism, and also adds and they give a Negro 20 years for selling a bag of crack. It's crazy, man. Yeah, you get arrested because of selling a bag of, and these people are opium. Have you seen that opium? How this is crazy. That was
Is that the whole, not just them, the whole Joe becomes a video, I know some TikTok showing the whole British and American empire was built on the drug addicts of China, opium. Yep. All these fortunes in America created off the backs of Chinese opium. Yep.
Yeah, because they discussed about how British, they brought their military machines, whatever, to just keep observing. If people try to go against the market, it's war on you. Saying
yeah, because China had nothing, because Britain had a trade deficit. Britain didn't make anything that China needed or wanted, and so but Britain wanted everything that China made. So, like I said, they're savages. They're gonna find a way to take over your country and do it. China was richer than Britain, just like India was richer than Britain, but they got conquered by Britain.
Yeah, but I also see Hakim says, did you hear those two boys that were recolonize Haiti? I'm not sure, but I don't know. Like I was reporting earlier, I know Guinea-Bissau, there's a coup happening right now. That is the yes. In Guinea-Bissau, the president has been arrested by the military and thrown out.
And the guy with the white lady, or was that the other Guinea?
This is the new president. There's the new president, because Guinea-Bissau just had the election recently, and now we had the new president who has been thrown out. His name is, let me get the name correctly, President Omaro Sisco. I'm not sure if he's the one with the white guy. I'm going to check that very quickly. President Omar Sisco. Just a minute. Let's see. Nah, he's not the one with the white lady. This is the new president. His wife is black. But yeah, he's been arrested. That was an hour ago, and I was starting the show. And yeah, been thrown out by the military, and the military has taken control of the country. That is what is happening currently in Guinea-Bissau. But I also see Danny Karibu Sana said he had watched that video earlier. Nice to know that. I see you guys are informed. But I also see Danny says, I wonder if they have the connections with the Lee family. Could be, because I was checking that when I saw that question you popped. I was trying to check the Lee family, and again, understanding, follow the money. There's no way the dynasty and the political power and the influence and all that I've read about them, there's no way they wouldn't be involved. That is my 2 cents on that. But I also see Jiba Jaba, John Mosquito, says Pearl Harbor was in that a war zone. And Jiba Jaba says, Joby, are you doing a crossword puzzles while we watch the documentary? No, that was my WhatsApp. I think that was my WhatsApp popping like that because of the messages that were popping in. But I also see John Mosquito says, how much is that in today's money, you reckon? I don't know. You should have asked that guy. Last time you told me I'm not doing my maths well. I don't know. But I also see Jiba Jaba says, well, I wonder if there were a community of African traders from Mombasa or the Cape. I do bet so. From Mombasa especially, yeah. Yeah. Also maybe, yeah. I do bet.
Yeah, of course. Of course they were. Yeah. That's That's true. There were.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
but I don't know. I'm sorry, Joe, because I don't know if this Guinea. I got to find out what is this president represented. If he was against the West, that's why they cooled his ass. I don't know what he was against yet. You know, this would be a CIA European coup. Oh no, they're not going to take power. So I guess I don't know what this president was about. Because it seems fishy to me that he got cooled already. Because they're usually, and people not really the people in the military are not really that organized. This might be a coup done by, those folks. Okay, those folks, because he was a threat to their power.
yeah, so they just had their general election that was on 23rd of November. So he's not even lasted a week in the office.
I know, so that's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm saying. For to be that quick, this leads me to believe this was a coup by the Europeans, not a real coup. You know what I'm saying? The coup by them.
I get you. I also see John Mosque says, I was hoping Brother Keith wouldn't see that video. It's just embarrassing and pathetic. Yeah, I'm about to wind up with that.
I see. Yeah. I saw that video, Jim. It was truly disturbing. Like I said, it was like, I was like, my God, what is you make all African people unsafe. This is, like I said, and this is what I'm trying to explain to Joby. I know Joby didn't see the same thing with that Indian lady and the black guy. Oh, I give you place. Oh, Dolly, what do you ID? Oh, thank you so much. The weakness. They say he's helping them. No, he's making them look weak and feckless to the world. Oh, my dear, get on the ground and oh, thank you. No, hell no, you don't do that.
John Mosquito, I don't think he was Kenyan. They didn't specify where he was from. Okay?
Yeah, they say it was Kenyan. Yeah, it's on the video.
Damn, what a shame. It's crazy. But this is the video.
Them Africans be getting dog walk.
They keep raising all these cowards. It's crazy.
That is crazy too.
And in front of these Arab motherfuckers know never to do this in America. Did anybody black? Yeah, they know that. They know that. They know that's the end of their ass. Look at this shit. Man. When you fucking die, you shut the fuck up, you nigga. You come a punk, you bitch punk ass nigga. Look at this shit. See, back in the day when women control South Africa, you would never have a seed like this. You would wipe his seed out. You make sure this man can have babies. You wipe his seed out.
You could have even beaten him, his hand, like bite that hand, like walk with a finger out or something. Like, you're not gonna do. Oh my God!
They ain't got to bite. They got to bite his damn finger, grab his arm and flip him on the truck and beat him to death. Gotta bite nobody's finger. Shit, you up out of here. What?
This is crazy.
But
while you enslaved,
dog walked by Arabs in Dubai. Y'all seen this Arab man choking out this African taxi cab driver in Dubai. He's over here screaming like a hyena,
like a woman. You know this is going global.
Damn.
While you're getting beat up by Chinese.
About to meet his maker, like time
Crazy.
that finally ran down. This man chased him out of his own car.
Shameful.
This is what comes with the territory. They get treated like this all the time. And the cab company that he works for, this African, they're not going to even let him go back to Africa because they're keeping his passport. So once you go to these Arab countries and you're African, you expect to get treated like this. This is like the norm. This is nothing new.
Yeah, exactly. It's the norm because these African men are cowards. So this is what they get treated like everywhere they go. They've never stood up. They show their ass. Thank you, brother. This shit is crazy. This is why you get treated like this.
He called me when he said he was screaming like a hyena. Oh my God, that's so crazy. I didn't even think about that. He's screaming like a hyena. This is crazy.
Coming to these Arab countries just to get treated like this. Crazy. And y'all keep coming back. Africans keep going back over here.
Oh my God.
He has his passport, so he cannot leave the country. He's being forced to go back to work with his injuries. Can you believe this? He is the victim, and somehow he's the one being treated worse than the person who did this. Sadly, the Kenyan government has yet to reply, even though this happened 2 weeks ago. Imagine that. Millions of Kenyans are demanding for justice for Brian, but the Kenyan...
You'll keep how many Africans have been treated this way? You want to demand justice now? Are you crazy? Again, justice is a matter of power.
That's right. That's right. Matter of power.
This is crazy. How many Africans have died there? Women, and your government stands on the TV, on the media saying, "Oh, you see, you take your backward cultures there. You get yourself treated that." Excuse me, like please. Like I left my comment on that video, please. Just struggle, hustle in your country. Eat ugali and skuma every day. Eat githeri. Eat matoke. Eat. Why do you want to go to these countries for what? I understand they're desperate.
Because then they go get some money, Joe. They're gonna live a better life. They don't know, and a lot of them didn't know that these people like I said, Africans have grown up not knowing that you have enemies. That blows my mind, but they have. It blows my mind.
These people are our friends. I mean, missionary, our visitors, like the South Africa, our visitors. You smile to your visitors, or your mom is gonna slap the shit out of you. Like, please, stop playing. You're trying to act like you're what? It's crazy, man. But we need to learn better. We need to learn better. Dragon Street says that Woozy was Kenyan. All right, take one for the team, Joby. I'm not taking shit because I'm beating your ass. Don't mind me. God, for me, I'll do anything. Oh my God. What? I can't imagine me. What? No, I'm not even trying to imagine because what? My calculated tactics. Oh my God. Leave alone even a paper spray. I can fight. I'm not even joking. I can throw a punch. I'm gonna break your dick. Have you ever been beaten on the balls? Oh my God.
All right. Gotta do what you got. You better teach his ass about the beating on the balls.
Yeah, like please don't play with me. But I also says like, was he arrested for being gay? No, of course not. I thought it was illegal in those Arab countries. I mean, it's crazy, man. It is super crazy. But don't try that here at home. Don't try that here at home. That's all I can say. How much love, family? That's where we come to the end of today's conversation.
That lady calling me shit.
Have yourselves a beautiful, beautiful day. Let me share the remaining part of the video with you guys.
Well, family.
And of course, see you guys tomorrow, same time, same place. Peace, and we out.